things. I think he's safe for a number of reasons. One, his physical skin color, his lightness makes him safer. In LA, we say everyone is brownish, because everybody kind of is, right? You know, sort of brownish. So he's brownish, and that's very familiar. Allows people of different races to find a point of connection with him because, you know, kind of similar color, if you will. I also think that Obama is safe because he doesn't have what I'm calling hoodness. He doesn't have the experience of growing up in the inner city in urban America. Like, he doesn't have any first cousins, right, that grew up in the projects in Chicago on the South Side, like that sort of thing. So he's safer because he doesn't have ties to that sort of hood environment that comes with all those stereotypes. I mean, he didn't grow up in the continental United States, so he doesn't have those experiences with racism the way other African Americans have experiences with racism. And I think he actually has a complex about it. Right. Because whenever he wants to talk about race or make points of connection with people who do have hoodness, he brings up Michelle and the fact that she's from the South Side of Chicago. I'm like, we know that, Obama, we don't really need to hear you say that again. But every time he does, right? And he talks about his daughters who have the blood of slaves and slave masters in their bloodline, but he can't signal that to himself because his African ancestry is African, right? Which is also something that makes him safer as well. Like, right? Even if you're an African immigrant when you come to the United States, well, at least you're not African American, right? At least your people weren't slaves, like that stereotype. That stereotype traffics as well for Obama. So it makes him safer, I think, to the white population in a lot of ways. But for some of the black population, it makes him kind of suspect, too. He prefers to use the term, well, how do I put this? Very rarely does he use the term African American. He uses it in a generic sense, but not to describe particular people. He prefers the term black because I think black is more of a mixed term than African American is a mixed term, because you say African American, it's kind of like you're hyphenating any other immigrant population, oh, except they were stolen, right? And it's not quite like that. But black allows him to sort of be black in an African sense when he needs to be black, and sort of black in the American sense when he needs to be black, but he's never really married to that in a lot of ways. So yes, you're right. I think there are major identity issues going on there, and it depends on who he's talking to, what side of the fence he wants to end up on. Well, that's why we made that joke about the one drop, the one drop rule, right? So this is where we could start to have a productive conversation. What is Barack Obama's ethnicity? Well, in the history of the United States, if you had one drop of black blood, that made you black. How come that conversation doesn't come up when we talk about his ethnicity? The reason why we have trouble wanting to put him in a box and can't figure out how to do it is because we've got 400 years of doing it this old way, and today we want to try to do something different. So why don't we talk about why we always did it this way, how ineffective it is, how it does force people into boxes, how it doesn't really appreciate the diversity of American society, how there are lots of people of mixed race ancestry that would like to celebrate all of their different aspects of their identity, but the way our country is structured, we're not allowed to do so. That's a more productive conversation. Let's just go all the way back to the beginning, start there, and then see if we can end up someplace new. But if we continue to start at the end, well, he's black, he's white, if we don't know the history behind it, then we're never going to come to any sort of resolution. I think his ideas about race are severely underdeveloped in general. I mean, his family is made up of people of color who have all been oppressed people, right, for the most part. And yet he doesn't talk about how race is linked to oppression. He preferred to structuralize it in class terms, and that makes me very, very uneasy. I was like, this is a man who could really make a push from his Islamic background, right, like all of that brownness, right, on the other side of his family, but he doesn't. Like, he'd rather do a class thing. I personally think that he hasn't really worked it out for himself yet. And when he comes to the black community, like, he talks bad about the black community. I haven't figured out why they are so happy to cheer for him. He comes into public spaces, it's like, it's your own fault, you're in the problem that you're in. Stop feeding your children chicken and Kool-Aid and get off your behinds and go to work, right? And do better for your community. I'm not here to help you, you're supposed to help yourselves. Fathers need to be in the home. If you're not in the home, we're going to put you in jail. Like, how does that help, right? Why would Obama say those things in public spaces? And then the black people stand up and cheer, we love Obama. And I was like, I don't understand, right? How can we count on this man to defend the black community when he's telling you straight up that he's not going to do anything for you? He gives them the personal responsibility argument, but he can talk about Joe the plumber and say we need to make sure that working class people have jobs. Like, how could you be so open on the one hand and so completely closed on the other hand, and then expect the black community to think that you're going to defend them when need be? I mean, I asked a friend of mine, we were making small talk, and I said, do you think Barack Obama will sell out the black community? And he was like, he says he hasn't already. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. As cynical as you might have guessed I have a tendency to be, I hadn't even thought of it that way, right? But there are individuals that already feel like he's sold out the black community. We have to contextualize that too. Right? I mean, I personally believe that black men are less likely to gangbang in the streets if they felt that they had a job that was affirming and put legitimate legal money in their pockets.
Exactly.
Right? No one is going to take those huge risks, life risks, if they believe they have something to live for.
Right.
So if we can give them something to live for, like I said, a legitimate job that pays a decent amount of money, then that's automatically going to start pulling kids out of the street life. They're going to make different choices because they feel like they have other resources and opportunities available to them. So it's easy to say, hey, like, get out of this banging business and do something with your life, but if they don't have a mentor like you to show them how to do that, if they've never seen, if they come from 3 or 4 generations of banging, if they've never seen what it looks like to live the square life, right, then who's going to show them that? What are the rewards going to be? So all of that needs to be contextualized. That's what I mean by systemic, right? It's not just individuals doing crazy things just because individuals do crazy things, but we're all influenced by the way society is structured.
Yeah.
The media can go as far as it wants. Like, I'm all for the free speech. I mean, these racist images, they bring me joy because they are opportunities to start to have conversations that otherwise we wouldn't have. I love them. Put them up in classrooms, send them to all my friends. I'm like, hey, I told you that there are still issues that we need to be talking about. And if I just bring them up, then I'm an angry black woman that hasn't adjusted to 21st century life. But when they drop into my lap, then we can really start to unpack them. Now, here's where we go wrong. Al Sharpton's all over television acting like his feelings were hurt, as if it were something personal, but it's not personal. It's about systemic forms of oppression, and we need to be talking about those systemic forms of oppression. Spike Lee trying to boycott the New York Post isn't going to do anybody any good. If you want to talk about these images of murdered black men and comparing them to apes, then why don't we talk about the history of lynching and how many black men we've lost in that context? Why don't we talk about how the sex balance ratio started in 1850 when men were being lynched writ large and continues with the prison population, the 20% that are in prison? Why don't we start to have conversations about these things? About the man that was killed in Oakland, right, on New Year's Eve, like police shot him in the back. Like, those are real things that happen that we'd rather brush under the rug. But as soon as I see an image like that, I'm like, hey, let's put it up and talk about where it comes from. So I think that lots of the black leaders in the public eye aren't talking about the real issues. They are whining as if their feelings got hurt when they should be talking about like what we're going to do to make systemic changes. No. Well, I personally think most of the speech is lip service. I mean, if you're a black man and you're the first black attorney general, someone's going to expect you to say something about black people during Black History Month. And so he does so appropriately, but it's almost as if someone gave him a list of black people who were important and he read it off. It's not, it doesn't suggest that he has done his history or has named people that aren't common people that others would be encouraged to look up and start conversations about. Like, he really took the easy way out on that. And then on the same day, like the New York Post runs a racist image of Barack Obama being shot by white police officers, but it's not really racist because black people don't get shot by white police officers. It just seems to me that perhaps the gloves are about to come off when it comes time to talk about race, but not in productive ways, but in the more stereotypical trite ways that we're used to. The innocuous ways that Holden does, and then the more racist ways that the New York Post does, but then says, oh, but that's not racist because that was a really long time ago and it's based in a different context. So I think that race is getting decontextualized, if you will, so that we can talk about it only in these safe ways that don't really require us to get down to like the nitty-gritty of history of race relations in this country.
So is that going to be helpful or harmful?
I think it's going to be harmful.
And I think it's going to be harmful too because I've been thinking a lot about Michael Steele and the RNC appointing Michael Steele to be the head of it, and sort of what it means to pit the two black males sort of in the spiral to the bottom, fighting over the very limited resources that sort of the white government is going to allow them to really have, and then force them to explicitly produce a black masculinity that they're going to eventually, you know, sort of, destroy them because of. So it'll be very interesting to see, I think, how Michael Steele positions himself as like the other black man in the public sphere in politics, and what sort of the media framing is going to be around their conversations about where politics is going and what kind of politics we want to have. Because it seems inevitable that the race talk is going to happen in some ways, but I have to say